use my fist as a gavel. Welcome, everyone, to the City of Lawrence Stormwater Board special meeting. We have two of our three members present. Tracy Boyd is supposed to be joining us via Zoom as soon as she gets home from work. So hopefully that will be shortly. We will start with the revised agenda. I want to start with citizen comments. Do we have any citizens who would like to make comments about anything? Come on up. Anything that's on your mind. Sure. I mean, yeah, we're still waiting on our third, so yeah. If you could, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name's Tom Redford. My address is 7250 Elm Ridge Drive, and that's Indianapolis, Indiana, 46236. So I've been a citizen of Lawrence for roughly 50 years off and on, take out college and a couple other assignments I had outside of the state or country. And what I've got is an erosion problem behind my house. And I don't know, is there a gentleman named Jamie or Jamie on his email address? No?
Jim?
Jim?
It'd be that man.
Are you Jim? I'm Jim. Okay. I may have corresponded with you 3 or 4 days ago. But basically, this issue I've had is the creek behind our house is roughly 40 feet deep. And the storm water that's collected for quite a bit of the area, the whole court, goes into the system and discharges down there into the creek. And the creek has some major erosion going on. And I tried to address this about 20 years ago, and not aggressively, and nothing really happened. And since then, I've been trying to do what I can to try to keep the water from the very top going down, put some pipes in, and did that, built a little retaining wall, tried to do a bunch of stuff, but it keeps sinking. And about 6 years ago, I had Scott Salisbury, who used to work for you. He came out with a couple of people from DNR or EPA or something. They all looked at it. They said, yeah, you know what, you got a problem. But we really didn't get it solved. And then about 2 years ago, another gentleman who I think used to work for y'all, he was the engineer, had a really difficult last name to pronounce.
Shri
Venugopala.
There you go. He came out and they looked at it, and they did take some action. They placed some sidewalk pieces up against the discharge. On one side, there's 2 discharges. On the other side, they actually put new concrete around the discharge. That was done 2 years ago, but it's still sinking. And in fact, it's sinking, I think, even more. I had a large tree come down about 3 months ago, and yeah, there it is. And so I'm just trying to figure out what else we might do to help solve this problem, or at least decrease the amount of erosion.
Okay. Renee, I will first look to you for advice. I know or Jim.
I'm trying to get there. Jim
Okay, Jim might be.
I was pulling it up here so we could see.
So there's a creek.
Let me get the layers on.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it looks like we got a structure right there and a...
For all the purple lines,
an open
right?
channel.
That's your problem. Put on creek.
Nope. So is it calling it a stream? No, yes, it's calling it a stream. Not a regulated ditch or drain. So it's referenced as a stream. Open channels. Looks like we're discharging.
Purple lines are the sewers?
Yes, it's this. No, the property line says purple line. this blue line is a storm system, this brown is storm, that's the creek.
They're on the labels. It should show up there. Storm sewer labels.
You want storm plains?
No, storm main labels.
I do see one part that I think's missing.
I wrote down
See the diagonal part that goes through the southern part of my yard? There's a, back up a little bit from the street, right there, and then diagonally down. There's a structure in there, and there's another structure that's in my yard. And from that point, there's a line that goes straight up, almost right to where the two roads intersect. Elm Ridge, yeah, right up there. There's an inlet, and the pipe goes from that inlet down to
Right here?
that structure. Well, there's that
There's an
inlet.
inlet
I got a
there.
lot of inlets and discharges, but
Okay.
it's more, if you go back up where the point is, but then go further up and to your left a little bit, right up in there, there's another inlet. And that pipe goes all the way down and connects into this same system. I do have a drawing, if that would help at all, that shows it.
Sounds like we're gonna have to come out to the property, look at it and see what we can see and then try to figure out what's happening.
if it works, so I can do a drawing.
Yeah.
Years ago, yeah, I think it was in the spring of 2 years ago. And again, they carefully placed all these pieces of concrete, broken up pieces of concrete slab down at the bottom.
What's actually sinking, your ditch or the pipe?
Well, there's several things sinking. It's all up at the top that's
You're
sinking.
saying it's eroding, is what you're.
It's big time eroding. I mean, if you go down in the creek, you can see, vertical walls maybe 10, 15 feet high. And you know how this creek snakes. So every time it hits the bank. But up at the very top, where Nile Ridge Court Street is, and the sidewalk to the east of it, that's sinking. It's the sidewalk. It's sinking. It has been for years. I keep filling in the space between the road and the sidewalk, and where those two were originally even, the sidewalk's down maybe 8 inches now lower than the curb on the road.
Okay.
So that's all sinking, and then if you follow all the way around to my yard, it's sinking. You can see it more from the top.
If you can hang out till after the meeting, I'll get your contact information.
Okay,
We'll get in touch with the contractor that we had out there a couple years ago,
okay,
see what he can remember, and then do a site visit and see if we can't figure out what's going on and what we need to do to fix it. I don't want you giving me all that information, and
no, I got it.
so if you can hang out until we're finished, I'll
That'll
get
be
all
fine.
that.
That'll be
We'll
fine.
set up a inspection to come out and look at it. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
And it's
Okay.
Tom, right?
Redford.
Yeah, Tom Redford, I've got the address and all that.
Tom, thank you very much. Yeah. Renee and Jim. Take care of that. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on. Comments from the administration? None, okay. Thank you, Chris. Our next item of business, new business, approval of the minutes from the special meeting on June 11th. Tracy and Rob, you should have.
Make a motion to approve them.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Motion passes on the minutes. Our next item of business, approval of the 2025 budget. You guys should have both received a copy of the budget. Questions or discussions on the budget?
Yes, is this a zero-based budget?
That's probably a question for Chris. Chris, we need you.
Thank you. And is this your cell phone stuff too? Just to be aware. Thank you for inviting us here this evening. The control, excuse me, the controller probably would be better suited to answer that question, but from what we've been able to gather, it's still a proposed budget at this point, and I think it's moved from committee last night back to the full common council, but I can't answer with, I'll try to do my best, understanding that I have limitations, but I'll try to do my best to answer those questions, but I don't have the correct answer for you this evening.
Okay. That's a fair response.
Second question, there's a line item in there for capital for $60,000. Is it identified what that is intended for?
And you're speaking of the 630 Stormwater Fund under expenses, just so the public is made aware.
Correct, yes.
For capital, meaning the 2025 proposed budget of $60,000. Again, these modifications were made by the controller. I was not given specificity as to where those funds were for the body, and it would probably be a question better suited for the controller. And I know that seems to be like the theme, but that's probably where we are here this evening.
Understand. So just for the record, so on account 431002 engineering, looking for an explanation of the $328,000, $750 reduction in engineering in the proposed budget.
That's a very good question. So you're speaking of account 630 under the Stormwater Fund, line item 431.002 under engineering of the proposed 2025 budget, removing $501,000. Again, those modifications and changes were made by the controller, and so I'm unable to provide you an adequate answer as to where those funds are at this time.
Okay. And then for the record, under the same 630 Stormwater Fund, account 436.001, it's like a reduction of $1.366 million from prior year. Was just looking for an explanation as to how we justify that much of a reduction in repair and maintenance.
That's correct. And there aren't any periods of time where I can remember coming before the board and asking for a modification in the repairs and maintenance. Again, that's a modification that the controller did. Additionally, I want to call your attention to, it appears too that there's under 431.004 under general consulting, that there's also a $100,000 discrepancy as well. And that's right below your first inquiry, just so the public is made aware. So these modifications and changes were made by the controller. And so I don't have an appropriate response as to where those funds are, but I just wanted to make sure that the body's made aware.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to remain here this evening if you have any other questions for the administration or.
The Stormwater Fund, just for clarification, the stormwater funds are collected from stormwater fees to the Stormwater Board, and their intended uses for addressing stormwater issues, correct?
That is correct. So the question is whether or not the funds that are collected from the public are specifically designated or earmarked for stormwater purposes, and that is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, one other question I had. Are you done, Rob?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Okay. Just on the statement of revenue and expense, I see in the proposed budget, there's $176,138 in personal services proposed. That has never been in our budget before.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same, so you're speaking to Chair under Statement of Revenue, Expenses, Personal Services, where there was no line item. I don't know whether that money actually, I don't know where that figure came from, and I was trying to reconcile that with some of the modifications in the stormwater fund, but I was unable to get an accurate number, so I don't know where that number comes from. And again, that may be something that controller,
Renee has
So
given,
on the Schedule 630 Stormwater Fund, page 1 of 3, under Personal Services, there's $120,000 for regular, and whatever that,
That's payroll.
okay? And that is similar to, that's an increase of prior year.
okay,
And
yes,
then
I see what
number-
you're saying,
And a number of other items
adding up to
that are adding up to that.
that figure.
But the 2024, on the summary, it doesn't show that in 2024, but it appears to be some sort of a 2024 revised budget. And it doesn't show up on the 2024 projection on Statement 630 Stormwater Fund, Statement of Net Revenues and Expenses.
I see.
I see what you're saying, Brad. There's no history for that
correct.
on that one document.
That you were
And on
provided.
the 630 Stormwater Fund, under Personal Services, there are some, so that's confusing.
It is very confusing. So what I'm looking at as well, and I see exactly where that number's coming from, with the 2025 proposed budget, adding all of the personal services added up will be $176,138. But again, I can't. It may be. My colleague was saying the possibility it could be for engineering services, but again, that's not really spelled out here.
Because it doesn't tie to the summary page.
That's right.
All right. Other questions? Tracy?
I'm thinking we don't have enough information.
That's where I'm
Can
leaning.
move that to another meeting.
I think that's the wise thing to do.
So what our options here are to give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or table it, I believe.
Yes.
So,
I did write down your questions, and I can present them to the controller,
okay,
and we can schedule, because this has to be passed by 1st of November. So we'll schedule another meeting to go over it,
I would
the
say
answers.
work with his schedule
I'm
to
in
make sure
favor of
he's
that.
available.
And would it be too much to have the controller here?
We can certainly ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll need a motion to table it and a second and a vote, please.
Before we do that, was a controller on the invitation for this meeting?
Yes, he's notified of the meeting, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we table the budget for 2025, and we'd like to have the questions that were raised answered and have the controller present.
Second.
All right, having a motion and a second, we will take it to a vote. All those in favor of tabling the proposed 2025 budget until we can get some more answers, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None. The item is tabled. All right, our next item of business, approval of VS Engineering Supplemental Number 1, Construction and Inspection Services for Brookside Park Storm Sewer Replacement, changing the contract total from $103,422 to $184,846, an increase of $81,424.
Thank you for your time this evening. There have been, as you probably know, a number of issues with the Brookside Park. We had a a number of delays, and there was actually work that was stopped by the DPW office. And so VS Engineering has been the lead inspector on a majority of the projects, and their total costs have increased based on doing inspections that we've asked them to do because there have been safety issues, and we can go into specifics later. But there's been some ongoing issues that we've had with one of the contractors, specifically Midwest Paving. So these are what is represented if here's some of the costs that have been incurred there. So I'd be more than happy to answer any specific questions that you have, but that's where that increase is coming from.
So there's a 78% increase over the original contract amount, which seems quite significant.
It's very substantial, and I, unfortunately, we have been placed, the city, that is, have been placed in a position where if we didn't stop the work, then there will be increases that will balloon further. But VS Engineering, just to give you a little bit of background and context as to why this is this high, they've had to be on site, of course, throughout the whole period of construction with the stormwater improvements, with milling and paving. They've been there, and we've partnered with utilities to kind of mitigate some of the flooding issues in that area. Unfortunately, those costs, the original costs, have skyrocketed, and there was a stop work order several weeks ago, and we haven't begun work since that work was halted because of safety issues and workmanship. To that end, VS Engineering has provided us several reports. They've had 2 engineers on standby and provided several comprehensive reports as to where we are in terms of the work that the plans designated and to where we are as far as what has been produced. So they've been doing a lot of calculations, et cetera, and they've had 2 individuals there. I don't foresee these numbers increasing beyond this particular mark, with exception of what this board will approve. But we foresee, meaning DPW foresees, the project completing within hopefully this year. But there have been, again, numbers of safety issues going on. Why this number is so high?
And is this change order or this increase in the contract, is it anticipated that this will take us through completion of the project?
That I hope, but I don't want to misspeak and say that absolutely yes. But I suspect that we will maintain this particular numeric figure. However, if we have to terminate our employment with this particular contractor, that isn't in our plan. But if we do, then that probably will increase. But that's not our goal, to answer your question. So we want to make sure that we are good stewards of the taxpayers' money as well as your oversight. But we don't foresee that increasing substantially. But we can't say with certainty that it won't increase in small increments.
You've mentioned paving. Is paving the significant reason for this?
Yes.
Or other contractors?
Yes, so to answer your question, there have been, and my colleague behind me and my colleague in front of me know that there have been contracted to remove 1.5 inch of milling and paving and replacing 1.5 inch of milling and paving. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. There have been gross oversights, lots of materials that have been used that weren't necessarily contracted to be used or utilized on the site. And so the engineering, VS Engineering specifically, was lockstep with the city to ensure that we weren't being exploited. But there have been a number of issues on the site that are uncharacteristic for a job like this. So we're trying to stay ahead of the storm, and we're very, very cognizant of the costs and want to make sure that they don't balloon past the astronomical number.
At the last meeting, we approved a change order for $269,458 for anticipating this incremental work, especially to do with the, some laterals. Are we on track for that?
That's a great question. Yes, so you're referring to the 19 laterals that we approved, and I remember that meeting. So we thought, the city thought that we would save a significant amount of money, which we were, but the workmanship became an issue, and the overspending without authorization from VS Engineering. So we were very, very aware of the costs associated with the 19 laterals, and we didn't have to use some of those funds. And you could correct me, Renee, if I speak out of turn here, but unfortunately, it got to a point where there began to be some neglect in how money was being spent by another party, so to speak, without being blasphemous. But that's why we ended up in this position. But the laterals, we were saving money initially. We've been out to the site several times inspecting when the construction was going on to ensure that those costs weren't overrun. And it's got to a point where the decision was made by the contractor that, look, we, as a city, we were like, this can't continue. So that's when the stop work was instituted. A very valid question.
Okay.
Let me ask the question.
Sure.
If we're being asked to pay additional, that would imply that this is the city of Lawrence's problem as opposed to a contractor problem.
And that is a very valid question, and that is a concern that we've shared. Just to make the body aware, we have consulted with city legal and a number of players to kind of come up with a scenario that best address this issue. But right now, because the relationship is with the city of Lawrence and VS Engineering to act as our agent, and there is a level of obligation that we have to ensure that they're made whole, even though there's another subcontractor at issue. So we want to make sure that we make the relationship with VS Engineering whole, but there are some remedies that we're trying to seek to resolve the overarching issue of the construction company, if that makes sense without being too.
We have to be careful of what we say because this is an ongoing project. And there may be
litigation
in the future. And so we have to be careful what we say about the contractor and what they've done. So if you go out to the job site, it is very visible what the issues are.
which I would encourage.
Yes, and to justify this $84,000 increase, like Chris said, the engineer is an agent of the city. His only job is to make sure the city is getting what we paid for. And there was an issue with the quantities of materials that were being delivered and used. And we are not paying for those quantities until this is all resolved, but in the meantime, we have to pay our inspector.
And thank you, Renee. And just so the body's made aware too, we asked for a modification of the contractor's original request for money because those tonnages were off. So there was in the past, but basically usurping the authority that we gave to VS Engineering and going behind our back to seek finances, but we remedied that and set the record straight there. But as Renee spoke, there may be possible litigation. We hope not, but we're trying to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. And we want the citizens to be made whole, and I know you want, as a body, to make sure that the money is spent properly. And so that's what we've been attempting to do as well.
So is the arrangement with VS that because it's initially a stormwater project, the stormwater pays the inspector to ensure that the city agrees they're getting the right quality work?
That's exactly right. That's the perfect way to explain it. And when the DPW body originally partnered with utilities, it was to enhance the overall, once the ground is open, then there was a notion that, hey, let's fix everything that's available or ready to be fixed. And we thought we had a great partner in that. And I don't know if we still may, but that was the whole impetus behind that. And then once, and correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, but utilities work is pretty much complete without maybe a last
Punch list.
punch list. That's right. And so the issue was repaving and repairing lost curbs, inlets, et cetera. That became issue, which, as Renee suggests, I'll suggest driving by there and taking a gander at it yourself. But it was one of the reasons why we had to just immediately kind of halt work. But to answer your question, yes.
Okay.
I just have one last question. I saw the original completion date was July and then late September, and do you have any idea if we'll be finished by the end of the year?
Should be finished by the end of October.
Should be finished, yes. But that's a very good question, just so the public is made aware. This project has been ongoing for quite some time. And that was one of our concerns, DPW, that the elongated schedule and making sure that it was completed in a timely manner. Obviously, we ballooned past that time, but it's our hope that it'll be done before the winter hits.
Weather permitting.
That's very good. So
Yeah,
my
that-
colleague mentioned the grant that is required for us to have completion, substantial completion by November. We have made contact with the underwriter, and who's contacted the state of Indiana to ensure that we're very forthcoming, and they have granted us an opportunity. And if there needs to be another extension, then they will look at that at a case-by-case basis. But we don't suspect that there will be any resistance as it relates to granting another extension. But it's our hope to have that completed before the end of that timeline. Thank you, Jim.
We got a couple questions.
Sure.
What are the consequences if we deny this?
Well, we have to come up with the money somewhere. And we, as a department, don't want to muddy that relationship because they've been a good client and they've been a good partner there. But you have the authority to go back and review it and want more information, and we don't have a problem with that at all. And that's the purview of this body, which we completely support. What we will say is that it's troubling for us when we have individual companies seemingly want to take advantage of us and our goodwill. But Jim, do you want to say anything,
I was
please?
gonna say, if we fault on the Oprah grant, we have to come up with $600,000 too. So if we let the project go and don't do the Oprah grant, we've got to come up with $600,000.
I wanted to, I was just curious what our good money after bad is.
Right.
And,
We're sliding on a slippery slope.
okay,
And just so the board knows, we are in the liquidated damages portion of the contract. The liquidated damages per day on Midwest's part is $500 a day from the completion date. So we've got some negotiating room with the contractor, Midwest. But VS Engineering has been acting on behalf of the city on the job site the entire day, every single day of this project. And the issues that Midwest has had with the project has extended the time. Obviously, July was the completion date. We're about to start October. They have 3 months of extra work that they've done because of this that they should be paid for. And I think in the letter it says, 55,000 of this has already been accrued. And the remaining is for them to complete the project and do all the paperwork that has to be done with it too. So I trust VS Engineering. They've been a good partner for the city. Their inspectors have been very attentive and brought any issues they've seen on the site to our attention
And forthcoming.
and been very forthcoming. So they've been a very good partner with the city and making sure our best interests as a city are being met. And protecting the property owners and the city all the way through. I don't have any suspicions that this is inflated or in any way not legitimate on their part.
One last
If
question.
that helps.
Yes, one last question. Do we have the money in the budget?
Yes, sir, we do.
Yes, and the 2024 adopted.
2024 budget. it
Okay.
is
Yes,
there.
we do.
That's always an important question to ask.
Yes,
That is
it
true.
is very important.
Thank you for allowing me to explain.
Any other questions?
On here.
All right, then I will accept an appropriate motion or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the increase of $81,424 to the VS Engineering contract to handle the work that we just discussed.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? It passes.
Thank you.
Tell VS Engineering they need to come and tell us thank you and,
Well, they're actually doing something for us.
Yeah.
They're checking their work.
yeah. So, and I get that.
We have, not in their scope, they go back and check.
Okay. I'm curious to see how this sorts itself out.
Us too.
The next item on our agenda, acceptance of contractor's affidavit and inspector's certificate of completion and compliance for Silverstream Section 3.
So this is part of any new subdivision that is built in the city, provides an improvement bond when they start the section, and then when it's completed and 90% built out, they provide a maintenance bond. The maintenance bond is valid for 3 years from the date of acceptance, and then that infrastructure becomes part of the city's inventory. Silverstream Section 3 storm sewers are ready to be released from an improvement bond to a maintenance bond. The improvements were inspected as they were installed and by a private engineer that we hired to do that for us. And that is part of the document that you guys were sent. The Andrew Wainscott was the inspector, and we've received our as-built as required and everything that we need, and we are recommending approval or acceptance of the affidavit. And then if we can, tie number 5 in, the release of the improvement bond and the acceptance of the maintenance bond for the same improvement.
Okay, so let's take them one at a time.
Sure.
So on the affidavit from the contractor and the inspector COC, what they're saying is the contractor's saying, I'm finished, substantially complete.
Yes,
And the inspector is saying it was done per the plans.
yes, sir.
Okay. So what if the inspector missed something?
That's why we have a bond for 3 years. If something were to happen within the 3 years from us accepting the bond, up until, and we inspected again 6 months prior to the bond expiring, just to make sure that there's no issues, there's no sinkholes, grates that need to be replaced or anything at all with the storm sewer system. 6 months before this bond expires, we have a flag that pops up and we send an inspector out to make sure. We do a punch list and have them repair anything they need to repair and then do a final release of the bond at the 3-year mark.
Okay. Let's say that after we move to the maintenance bond and we discover that they used the incorrect asphalt and it was.
This has nothing to do with asphalt.
Okay,
This is literally only the storm sewer structures.
okay, all right,
Asphalt and base binder, curbs, sidewalks, that's a separate bond, each of those items.
Okay.
And that goes through the Board of Public Works and Safety.
okay,
And they're separately inspected. And Board of Public Works and Safety, just prior to your meeting, release the base binder and curbs for the same section,
okay,
okay?
all
So
right,
they haven't put surface down yet. They've not asked for the surface to be released, But if that were to happen, that would go through the Board of Public Works and Safety bond
Okay.
and would be addressed before we release their bond.
So this would say that, going back to this scope of work, if a structure were installed and it failed,
They would have to replace it as long as it's within that 3-year window. If for some reason we missed it and we allowed the bond to expire, it would be on the city to replace it.
okay? So that helps. All right, so if anything, if they have to fix it and 2 years from now, they go bankrupt.
That's why they have the bond. The
Then
bond
bondholder
guarantees. Yes, sir.
guarantees it.
So the bond is for 20% of the original construction cost. The improvement bond is for 120% of construction costs, and that accounts for inflation. The maintenance bond is for 20% of that construction cost. So if we had to, if they were no longer a company, we'd still have the bond, and we could go to the bonding company and get that 20% to make the repairs in-house.
Okay,
Not ever had to do that,
understand.
but that's how that would work.
I'm trying to understand,
Sure, and
What
asking
ifs.
questions is great, because I'm sure the public doesn't understand either.
right,
So we appreciate that.
okay?
I think if you're, I don't know if you're done, but I think in reviewing each of the bonds and segments of the document, I think it's pretty well spelled out.
All right, any other questions from the board? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the contractor's affidavit and inspector certificate of completion and compliance for Silver Stream Section 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seeing a motion and a second, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, which is basically 4B. Release of improvement bond and acceptance of maintenance bond for stormwater improvements in Silver Stream Section 3. Any questions or comments on that?
None here.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to release improvement bond and acceptance of the maintenance bond for the stormwater improvements in Silver Stream, Section 3.
Second.
All right, seeing a motion and a second, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? All right. We have hit the end of our agenda. This is our longest meeting so far. I'm impressed that you guys have all stuck with us. Seeing that there's no other business before this board, can I get an appropriate motion?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.